Everyone, it's DJ. Today I'll be showing you how to finish the back of a cross stitch project that you have finished to make the edges look really nice and neat and clean. And if you choose to use the hoop, this can be the frame and you can just put a nail in the wall and hang it through here and then it'll be done. So let's get started. First we want to take the whole thing off the hoop. And then it's going to be a little creased here, which is fine. We kind of want to leave that for now. And so there are different methods we can do to frame this in either the hoop, or if you want to use an actual frame, like a square rectangle, if your stitching will allow for that and look good in that, then you can just trim this fabric to the size of your frame, or leave a little bit left over to wrap around the edge of it, of the mat board in the back, and then iron this really well with a steam iron, and then you can pop it in the frame. But if you choose to use the hoop to frame it, and this one works really well with that because the design goes to the very edge of the hoop and it's a circle. So when we do this, I like to make this whole fabric a circle. So you can use a plate or a compass or something, or you can just freehand it. So you get a pencil, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So I just kind of freehand a big circle around just to cut these corners off is the whole point we're going for here. And you could iron this first if it's easier to make the circle. That probably would be easier, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And you just want to leave about an inch here from the edge of the hoop to the edge. So let's make this, and then grab some very sharp scissors. Any scissors you've used to cut paper are not going to do well on fabric, so get some really good scissors if you have them, or even if you have smaller embroidery scissors that you use to cut thread while cross stitching, that will work better because they're very sharp. But this pair is pretty good, so I'm just going to cut around here. Doesn't have to be perfect. And this is one of my kits that I sell in my shop. I'll leave the link in the description box below. This is the Latte Art coffee kit, and when you buy a kit from me, the fabric is pre-sewn around the edges to prevent fraying. And this is just to help you so the fabric doesn't get all messy when you're working with it. But we can cut this off when we're ready to frame it. And just to make it a little bit smaller, that's why I'm cutting like beyond the stitching right here. So let's cut this out. Just like that. We're just getting rid of the corners so it's easier to cinch this around the back and hide all this excess fabric around the back. So when you get to this point, if you have the ability, or a sewing machine or a serger like I do, to prevent any extra fraying, just for safety's sake, you can sew around the edge of this with a serger or with a regular sewing machine with a zigzag stitch. If you don't have one, it's fine. It's just when you go to stitch around it and cinch it, I will show you that later, you need to stay pretty far away from the edge so that it doesn't fray and break loose. But this is fine right here. And if your design part isn't wrinkled, then you do not have to iron this flat. I find it easier to get it back centered if you don't iron it at this point. So, but since I have a serger, I am going to go ahead and serge this. All right, this is what it's looking like after it's serged. It just binds that edge. You can see this kind of serging on like the inside seams of your t-shirts or sweatshirts or something like that. You'll see a similar stitching. That's what that is. It's just to prevent fraying. So now we're ready to put it back on the hoop. So take your lower hoop, the one without the clasp, put it on here, and this is where we want to be super precise in how up and down the screw is with the design perfectly centered at the top, and also we want to make sure that the design itself is perfectly centered within the hoop. So this is what is going to take probably the most time, is just that constant stretching, tugging, little tiny adjustments to make it exactly where you want it. And also a really fun thing to do before you put the design in the hoop is to actually paint or color the hoop, stain the wood with permanent markers. Do not use any water soluble markers on that. I have made that mistake before. Always use permanent markers or wood stain or acrylic paint, something like that that can't rub off or smudge onto the fabric. And that way you can just have a really nice look. And you want to do that before you put it on the fabric, because you want to be able to get on this inside edge and do that so it looks really nice and you don't see any bare wood if you do choose to color it a certain color that matches your design, or even black, because it kind of goes along with the whole like black frame look like regular art. So that is an option, and it's really nice to do if you don't want this natural bamboo wood look. So we're gonna slide it down and just keep messing with it until you are completely happy. And since this design goes to the very, very edge, I want to make sure that these stitches are kind of hidden under there so that no white is showing. And so every time you make an adjustment, you want to tighten it a little bit more so that you can keep tugging and just keep on going until it looks exactly how you want it. And you can try kind of like holding it so you can see if it's upright and it's centered this way. So just keep working with it. Tighten the screw. If it gets too difficult to tighten, this is a Phillips screwdriver head, and you can use some pliers to really tighten it more. But you don't want to tighten it so much, especially with the screwdriver, that you break this inner hoop, because this is just a piece of bamboo that is glued on a diagonal seam. So don't go so far that you break this hoop. It just wants to be just finger tight enough, and also enough that it sounds like a drum. You don't want any kind of lax in this fabric. So I am pretty happy with this so far. I'm going to just tighten it. Yep, I can't tighten it anymore. You can also tell how much you're tightening it. If these metal posts right here start bending inward, then you know it's getting really tight. So I like this. So now I am going to get a large needle such as this. This is a quilting needle, and it's really, really big and not terribly sharp, but it's for really large things. And the reason we want this is that you want to use some really strong thread. And I just so happen to have this thread, which is, I got this whole big skein at the thrift store somewhere. I don't even know what it's really meant for, but it's actually 4 strands of some thick thread. You could also use quilting thread and double it over. You could use crochet thread, like number 10 crochet thread. The point of this is that we want a really strong thread so that when we cinch it, it won't break, because there's going to be a lot of tension on it. So whatever string or thread you use, just make sure it's really strong. And also, you don't have to use quite a big of needle as this. You just have to have a big enough needle so that you can fit all your thread through the eye of the needle. Just like that. There we go. And then for the length of this thread, you just want to have it a little bit more, like 1.5 times the circumference of this circle. It's not going to take much because it's going to shrink. So tie a knot in the end. You want it to be a pretty big chunky knot, and you do not want it to become undone. So make sure that knot is strong. So I like to start at the top. It doesn't matter where you start. I just personally like to start. So I like to go underneath and then come down, especially if you didn't serge this, come down at least 4 or 5 of the squares on the Aida fabric. So go through it just like that. And then we're going to do a very large in and out weaving stitch like this. And we're skipping like 4 or 5 squares each time. And we're just going to go around like that. And it'll be fine if your fabric is not stitched along the edge, as long as you stay far enough away from the edge here. And just keep going around. Okay, when you've made it to the other end, it's going to look like this. And this is the fun part. So we're going to take this end and hold it down, and you're going to pull gently but firmly. And you want to pull until it gets about as tight as you can pull it without breaking anything. And hold on to this quite hard. And then you're going to put your needle up through the fabric, and you're going to try to tie a knot. And while you're holding this, so that it keeps the tension. There we go. See, it kept all of that. And then you're going to want to tie a double and triple knot just to make sure that that does not give out. And then you can cut that off. Leave quite a bit of a tail just in case. So here's the finished product. It looks awesome. And you can take an iron to this edge very lightly just to kind of like crease down these little bubbles, because it'll kind of hold it away from the wall if you try to hang it on the wall like this. Or you can set this whole thing under something heavy like a book for a few hours or a couple days or something like that, and it should crease everything down. Now, if you don't want to go the route of stitching this by hand, an alternate way would be after you cut this circle, then you could use hot glue and very carefully glue it to the inside of that inner hoop like that. Careful not to burn yourself while you're doing this, but this also will make it so that you can never take this design off this hoop in case something happens to the hoop that you would need to replace it, or if it cracked or something got stained or something. So that is one option. And you can also, if you want to hide this entire back, I have seen people take a piece of felt, white or something like that, and cut a perfect circle and then hot glue it on top of here just to hide the back of the design. And that is how you can finish a cross stitch project so that you can hang it on the wall in the hoop. Hope you enjoyed this and hope it helped. Thank you.